I apparently I'm supposed to have an opening act. I don't know. So, well, this is my first time at this show. How about you guys? Have you guys been here before? Oh, no? No? First time? Woohoo! I'm with you. Anyway, yep. Yeah, so it's my first time. So I really quickly walked the aisles over on this side. And the one vendor that really struck me was the chocolate. And I videoed it, and I think I drooled. I think I drooled a little bit on the chocolate. So it's all, I've now got to go buy all the chocolate. So how many here use rulers currently on their machines? No. Okay. And how many of you are on long arms? No, so you're all on domestic machines. So the motion's just a little bit different. You have to get used to moving your ruler as well as the fabric and everything at the same time, but you can still create some really wonderful designs with ruler work. Yes. Okay. All right. We ready? Okay. So I'm just going to, let's try that again. No, no. It keeps going out. Is that better? Okay. Okay, I'm really not liking the mic, but anyway. So I'm just going to show you some designs that you can create with 3 very simple rulers. So I'm going to use an arc ruler, a regular straight edge, and a circle. So we're going to start with a straight edge. So since most of you are on domestic machines, if you get used to using a ruler to do your stitch in the ditch work, you will not have to turn your quilt. So it'll really be a saver for your shoulders as far as the turning of the quilt. And so that's really important. I know most people use their walking foot. Yeah, no, you're doing it all wrong. All wrong. You have to use a ruler. It really makes it a lot easier. And you're just going to basically, some people use rulers. I asked you that? Okay. So just get this set up. So you're just going to want to make sure that your ruler rides along the edge. Now, how many people here are experts at putting on the borders on your quilt? So there's no waving at you. They're not saying hello. Nope, it keeps going out. Okay. So so when your borders wave at you, the best thing that you can do as far as quilting those borders are straight lines. So like piano keys or the beadboard border. So those are what I'm going to show you now. So when you are buying rulers, a couple things that you want to think about is you want rulers with a lot of markings on them. And you want those markings to actually be etched into the ruler. Okay, so you want, if you can feel it, you can feel that they're etched on there. They're never going to come off if they're etched on there. If they're printed on there, you just like any other ruler, that printing will eventually wear off. These particular rulers are my design. I designed them. They're Quilter's Groove rulers. They're made of extruded, cast acrylic versus extruded, which means that they're not going to have quite as much glare to them. So as you place them underneath, you know, that those lights not going to come back up and give you that glare. So that's really important. You also want to make sure, as well as that the markings are etched on, that there's a lot of them. The more that are on there, the more things that you're going to be able to do with those rulers. So as far as this particular ruler, each of these markings is 1/4 of an inch, and then your foot would be that last 1/4 of an inch. So if I wanted to do a beadboard border 1/2 of an inch, I would just come and make sure that I was going to move over so that I could line up that first line on what I've just stitched. Kind of back up a little bit. Down, over, line it back up, and back up. When you're dealing with rulers, one of the things that you want to think about too is the ruler might be long, because there's some really big rulers out there, is if I'm holding down here but I'm stitching up here, you don't have a lot of control. So I like to make sure that I try and get a good portion of my hand on the ruler and I typically will have a trailer. So I'll have a finger or two off onto my fabric. Since many of you are on domestic machines, you're going to want to make sure that you have some sort of grip on the back of it so that your ruler doesn't move and slip, and also machingers. So they're the machine quilting gloves. Those two items alone will really help when you're doing it. So I love piano key borders, but my favorite is a beadboard border. And the reason I like a beadboard border is because you can do it so that you're not traveling in the ditch a far distance. So that if you're not really precise, you're not going to notice it. So I'm going to show you the beadboard border. So we're going to do an inch spacing, which means I'm going to line up on my third line. I'm going to come back. I'm going to stitch down. Now I'd be in the seam. I'm going to stitch over until I see the edge of my foot with what I've just stitched. So I know that I've just moved over 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to line back up, and then I'm going to stitch up. And then I'm going to stitch over that inch, get lined back up, and then down, and then over that 1/4 of an inch. And this really takes up fullness if your borders give you that little bit of wave to them. So the other thing that you can do is you can do that on a 45-degree angle. And then you could come back the opposite direction. So we'll go this way. And it creates a really cool basket weave. And then you have that really cool basket weave design. So I am a quilted to death kind of girl. So, I mean, when I quilt my quilts, everything's quilted. So that's an example up there. I have spatial issues, so I know it's evenly quilted if it's all quilted. So I would look at this and I would have to come back in and I would fill in with like a little filler and everything else would pop out. So that's really good. So you'll see that there's 45-degree angles on this particular ruler so that you can line it up with your piecing, so you do get that nice 45-degree line if you wanted to do cross-hatching with it as well. So this is a really great ruler to have. There's also a smaller one called the Pro Mini, and it's a little itty-bitty one, and that's actually the one that I do all of my stitch in the ditch with. Especially on the domestic machine, because it's really just a perfect size to fit right into your hand. So that's really fun. I love curves, and the way I design, I have all of that 1/4 inch spacing in my quilting. And so if you use a circle to try and do an echo of what you've just quilted, you know that you kind of have to move that circle a little bit in order for it to work. So I designed these particular rulers to do a perfect 1/4 inch echo. So if I stitch along the top of this ruler, what I just stitched will match perfectly with the bottom of the ruler, and vice versa. So if I stitch along the bottom, it matches perfectly with the top. So that's what I actually designed these for. However, since rulers are expensive, you want them to do more than just one thing. So I also use these to do curved cross hatching with. So I'll show that one to you now. So let me just move this up and out of the way. So we're just going to come over here. So unlike straight cross hatching, that if your lines are off at all, your eye will pick it up immediately, curved cross hatching is very forgiving. So it's really nice if your marks are a little off. So we're just going to do that to show it to you. So we're going to do a 1/2 inch cross hatching. So then you're just going to move up and out of the way and then scoot up to that first line. Now, typically when I do curved cross hatching, I have a big X in the area that I want to do it. And I make sure that that center line is right on the X. So I'm not kind of wavering back and forth. So we'll see what this looks like afterwards since I don't have that line. And then you would just come back down the other way. This is a really good beginner application though. And then you have that really pretty curved cross hatching. So again, since I quilt everything to death, I would have to come back in and I would fill every other one of those with little stippling. But I won't do that today because that takes a really long time. So anyway, so anywhere that you would need a curve on your quilt, you can use this. So I'm just going to quickly show you if I stitch along the top. What I just stitched will match perfectly with the bottom. And you get that perfect 1/4 inch echo. So, very fun. So if you're just starting out with rulers, I always suggest the best thing for you to do is get a straight edge and a set of circles. Everything, all those specialty rulers and whatnot out there are based on really circles. So if you're making a spine, you're gonna, do one here, go this way, the other one, go the other way. Do you know what I mean? So there's a whole lot you can do. When you're stitching around a full circle, one of the things I always like to say is I start at 9 o'clock and I stitch around as far as I can get. I stop and then I switch the position of my hand and I come around and finish up those last 15 minutes. Okay, so it's really important to stop. And typically, when I stop, I like to keep my needle in the down position so that if you bump the machine at all, you're not going to do some errant stitches that you're going to actually have to rip out. So one of the things that I like to tell beginner quilters when you're doing rulers is that if you're holding your ruler and you see the whites in your finger, you're holding the ruler too tight. So it just should be light pressure on the ruler, because that's going to allow you to move the machine, whereas with all of that pressure down there, you're actually not going to be able to move the machine very well. But the same thing applies for the domestic machine as well, because if you're pressing too hard, you're not going to be able to move your fabric very easily. Yeah, exactly. Do you guys have questions for me as far as ruler works? Mm-hmm. Correct. So, yep, so they're right around the corner on the other wall. Mm-hmm. Yep, on the Bernina stand. Mm-hmm. And I designed these rulers because when I was quilting, there were certain things that I wanted the ruler to do, and it wasn't out there, and so I started to design them. So I am probably the world's laziest quilter that ever lived, and if there's a shortcut, I'm going to try and find that shortcut. So, yep, so I designed all of these rulers. Yeah. Did you guys have any other questions for me about ruler work? Or no? No? So circles are great to do swags. So if you wanted to do a swag border, you've got your lines on the ruler here, and that you can line up with your piecing. So we'll just pretend we've got some piecing here. So then if I wanted to do the swag, I would start and I would just kind of push my ruler up a little bit. I would stop here at the top. I would make sure that I'm going to be 1/4 of an inch away from where I want to land. And I would come back down into that. And then you just move it over again. Stop at the top. Make sure that you're 1/4 of an inch away. So you get some really pretty swags. Oh, sure. Sure. So you're talking about like a spine? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if I line up here, so the more circles you have to choose from at home, the better it is, because depending upon, you might not want your spine to be that small. You might want it to be bigger, so you would use a bigger circle. And you might not use the whole half of a circle. You might decide that you're just going to use one of the other markings. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And then you can come back and you can do some fun ferns and feathers on those spines. So there's lots of fun things that you can do. Yeah. You're very welcome. You're very welcome. So what do you guys think? You guys ready to dive into some ruler work? So, yeah. I don't believe they're sold as a set. They're all individually priced, and the pricing is actually on the ruler, so you guys can check those out. All of the rulers have videos that go with them. So if you go on to, on YouTube, yep, so it's all right there. So if you're like, oh, I got this ruler, now what was she saying I could do with that? I don't remember. Then, you know, you can go online and check to see. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that one is my all-time favorite. And every time I have it, I sell out of it very quickly. Yeah, so that one's the Pro Mini. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That they're showing line. So always make sure that you have a guideline. So school chalk is your best friend. Do you know what I mean? Just chalk that middle line, and then they're going to know that you're staying nice and straight in your border or wherever you're putting it. Yeah. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of different sizes in those as well. Yeah. There is also, so there's also a smaller one, but this one's actually, this is a good size as well. Yeah, especially, you know, on the domestic machine, you don't want to get too long, because then they're kind of harder to manage under your, on your sewing machine. Yeah. Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome.